partidei. Delgado acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
Good afternoon or evening or whatever it is whenever you are. I need to stop giving those sort of time orientated intros. It just doesn't work in this modern world of internet broadcasting. You are listening to Verde broadcasting, and in the week that has just passed we have heard that The Matrix is returning. New Matrix film. I can't remember exactly what on the year, but we're going to talk about that. I am joined as usual by Duncan Casey, co-owner of Verde Broadcasting. Hello Duncan Casey.
Hello Richard Jackson, also co-owner of Verde Broadcasting. How are you?
Democracy. I'm jolly good. Well, let's get right into this. I mean, what's happened is there has been what is solid at the moment, and I think a few things have been sort of neglected and misinterpreted in this announcement. We have Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Lana Wachowski coming back for a Matrix sequel. Now, here's the thing. You have Lana and Lily Wachowski, who normally operate as the Wachowskis, but we only have one Wachowski, as far as I've seen in the official announcement, and lots of people are saying the Wachowskis are back, because that's a fair assumption. They still do stuff together, and the assumption would be that we're getting both Wachowskis, but we're not. It seems to be a solo Wachowski. I don't know what that means in terms of their working relationship and stuff. I just found that was the interesting thing that's been, perhaps glossed over by this announcement. So obviously the thing, spoilers for the Matrix films, sort your fucking life out. Spoilers for the Matrix films. Both the characters of Trinity and Neo, portrayed by Keanu and Carrie-Anne, die at the end of the third Matrix film. So that in terms of setting our scene for the new one, that's where we're at.
But with a lot of talk of well, the last one's called Revolutions, isn't it? So there's a lot of talk of cyclical stuff, and that's
yes.
So I guess it's, but then it's very unclear, because like in the second, anyway, I'm already diving into a thing with it, and I totally took that over. Sorry.
No, please.
But I was just gonna say, like, isn't it in the second one? There's the bit where he meets the architect, and he proceeds to waffle on about concurrently and vis-a-vis, just like Will Ferrell did brilliantly. But the there's all the screens with all the supposedly different Neos. I wasn't sure if that was definitively saying there were tons of different Keanu Reeves Neos, or these are just all possible scenarios that,
My interpretation of the one is that the one is a different person each time, but somehow reincarnated through a system, so they don't all look like Keanu Reeves. It's always my interpretation, because then you would just have to look for the guy that there would be no discussion of, is this the one? It's just like, there he is, it's the one. My kind of theory on this was the inevitable return of these kind of things. My theory would have been either like a reboot with a new cast, and there was talk of Michael B. Jordan, and it would be a reboot, probably a soft reboot, so set in continuity, because the story laid out allows for that, the kind of cyclical return of things, even though the third film seemed to be the end of that cycle. The other kind of thing I thought they might do for the longest time is possibly even do a prequel, because you've already set up all these previous The Ones, and it seems to happen once a generation or whatever. I would say the fiction of The Matrix allows for all of this, right? I mean, and it's about virtual worlds and stuff, so to a degree it doesn't matter who's dead or not. You could just be like, oh well, they're programs now, or whatever. So it allows for that. I mean, the issue I have, the broad issue I have is that I don't care. And more power to him. I'm not saying stop it, shut it down. I just don't care. I don't really think the Matrix sequels worked. I think the first Matrix works as a standalone. I haven't watched it in a long time. You and I discussed it on our show It Ain't Broke. If you go to YouTube and type in It Ain't Broke The Matrix, you'll find Duncan and I having a half-hour chat about the first one, so you get all our thoughts there, which are generally positive. For that film, but I kind of feel like the second and third film squandered that potential, and therefore I no longer care. Sorry, Lana.
It's funny. I mean, I sort of do and I don't. It's interesting. I feel a certain degree of apathy towards a fourth Matrix film. It's not tempered with the cynicism and the vitriol that I would feel towards your Terminators and your everything else. I don't feel that degree of cynicism around this that I do with a lot of others. I mean, it's not a reboot and it's a sequel, but though there's been lots of sequels to things that seem very cynically minded, and this doesn't. I mean, it's only an announcement, but it doesn't seem to be laced with.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely. Yeah, my feelings are very much more power to him. I'm probably not going to watch it. I don't care, but like more power to him. I don't think. Yeah, it doesn't feel like your Terminator Dark Fate or whatever. I don't feel it's not as nakedly cynical. You know what I mean? And
I think what's good.
I mean, more power to him, but
it's good as well that you've got. Your star isn't on a downward slide either. There's none of that sort of like desperation because they're trying to relive the glory days. Keanu Reeves is still very much and has remained.
Keanu Reeves he's riding high at the moment.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is what's motivated that, because the internet's in love with him, because he is, let's face it, a fine human being. But there's all the John Wick's been going on, and obviously Bill and Ted 3 is coming now. So I wonder if the kind of cultural capital of Keanu Reeves has helped give this its kind of push.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that's probably what it is, which is great. I mean, I now would be the time. I think. I mean, what are we? We're about 16, 17 years from when the last one came out.
2003, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah,
and I may well be mistaken. Let me look that up with my Oracle-style Batman's assistant.
I think it was, wasn't it? Because the Reloaded
that sounds right, man.
Came out earlier in the year in Rep.
Yeah, 2003. Because it was the same year we had like Kill Bill and stuff, wasn't it? Or was it?
It was around then.
Anyway, that's a different discussion. That's a discussion for another time. Yeah, well, I mean, look, we're kind of, there's a time out. There's a certain Jesus Christ, there has been a large gap since the last Matrix film that we discussed in our review of the Matrix that it's increasingly clear as kind of trans allegory now, particularly since the Wachowskis, as we all know, were previously the Wachowski brothers, and both the Wachowskis are trans, and the whole kind of subtext of that film of finding a secret world and coming out and is all kind of there. In terms of, I think one thing that makes me cynical about these kind of returning franchises is when they're not relevant anymore, and I think there's a very robust argument that the kind of themes of the Matrix are more relevant than ever. And I'm not necessarily referring to the trans stuff so much as the kind of the technological dystopia, the overreach of AI and machines, and
and the plugging in of people to a matrix, like a literal matrix. No, it's very much so, yeah. It'll be interesting though to see if it can keep up with that, because again, very much like Terminator 3 struggled with, and the subsequent films, it was like the whole idea of a sort of piston-driven machine infiltrated starts to become quite absurd when you could just write software that would, when every household has a device or multiple devices with cameras that are all linked up to the internet. Do you need? Is it efficient to be sending robots about the place, or could you just quite easily utilize that? I don't know. It starts to beg the question of relevance. Whereas I mean, the Matrix was never really that, was it? It was always it was more of a conceptual thing than it was a. I mean, though the execution was great, certainly the first.
Yeah. One. I mean, it's quite prescient in a lot of ways. It's been accused, of course, of ripping off the Invisibles, and there's definitely some strong influences there, and it's definitely a hodgepodge of other ideas. However, when I watched it at the time in '99, I was immediately put in the mind of the Terminator because of its machine enslavement of humanity and machine war and stuff. But it's more appropriate for a digital age, and it's important to remember that in 1999, when the Matrix came out, we were still very much the internet, the popular internet as used by the by people such as us, was in its infancy, really. And it was a concept, and there was loads of irritating buzzwords. People didn't really know what it was going to be like and what it was used for. And the Matrix has flip phones in it and stuff, and the imagery is of dialing in, because it's a byproduct of that analog internet. It was dialing in via a modem, so you would dial into the Matrix via a phone, stuff like that. But it was still kind of on the button, but it was pre-social media, crucially, but not pre-chat room, because that kind of stuff is reflected. But it came from a pre-social media concept of the internet, and I do think if you retooled it, because it is based in software and computers and virtual reality, it is still relevant. Whereas, as you say, the Terminator struggles to have that because it's about a piston-powered robot, which, if lent into and deployed properly, I'm convinced could be good as its own thing. But that ain't that ain't happening.
Yeah.
Chief. So
no, I mean I think the original stands alone because it's set in the 80s. You almost get away with it, even though it's something from the future. It's going back to a sort of time capsule period. Whereas when you're trying to do it now and it's got to be all glossy and anyway, that's another discussion. But yeah, I mean you're right. I do think the original Matrix is very much a product of its time, as you say. And it's interesting. I'm reminded of things like nowadays AI is in the common vernacular, but there's a scene in it where Lawrence Fishburne Morpheus has to explain to Neo what AI is, and Neo's supposedly a hacker, like the best hacker around, right? And he's like,
yes.
AI.
Do you know what? I never thought of that, and that's so true, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's clearly for the audience.
Computers,
but you know what I mean.
Sure.
It just wasn't.
Well, yeah, because he's the audience surrogate, isn't he? The whole.
Initially, anyway, until it's...
Yeah.
Well, no, I would say, yeah, you're right. I think in the first film he is, and then subsequent films less so. It's interesting. I mean, look, if it's going to be... what I don't want is for them to turn around and go, we're ignoring 2 and 3. This is the true Matrix 2.
Yeah, that would be... That's not good. I mean, there's certain things. There's an argument to be made for that. I haven't seen the more recent Halloween, the new Halloween film, and other such things. And of course, we've got Terminator: Dark Fate. But I don't think the Matrix needs that, and I do think its own fiction lends itself to, a reconfiguration, reappropriation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think it's there. I will say this much. Am I interjecting? Sorry, I should let you finish.
No, only to say that in that vein. I mean, I think the Halloween thing worked because those sequels were very much episodic, whereas I think that something like the Matrix and the Terminator, they're not. They are one continuity essentially. Like, there's an argument to be made that the Halloween sequels aren't necessarily continuous.
And I don't think that with the other thing as well, the Wachowskis made the second and third Matrix films, and I don't feel that they were interfered with. I feel like those are the films the Wachowskis wanted to make, and I also kind of feel like that's why they don't work.
Right.
Because I just don't think there's been any editorial. I'll say this much, having reflected recently upon the first Matrix, having had that kind of force back into my mind again, the 2 times in a year. The original Matrix, and I think I may have said this in a review, works very well as a contained thing, as a capsule, and a lot is always said of the fact that Neo kind of says, I'm Neo now, I'm coming for you, and he flies off, right, thus setting up the sequels. I don't agree, because I don't really think the story of the Matrix isn't about the war against the machines. The story of the Matrix is about Neo finding and accepting himself and making a transformation. And the final scene of the film is underscoring the fact that he has accepted his role in this world, and the drama of the Matrix is him becoming the one. By the time that film was finished, all the sequels had to deal with was the war with the machines, which is much less interesting, like the ins and outs of that. I enjoyed some of the Animatrix stuff, particularly the prequel, which explained how they got to that point. But the actual war against the machines isn't that interesting. Like, what was interesting was that, and it's classic kind of hero's journey stuff, really, in the first Matrix, and it does it very well, and it dresses it up in this kind of cyberpunk clothing with a lot of kind of groundbreaking special effects, because it literally shows us stuff. And again, I saw the Matrix on the basis of a teaser trailer which had bullet time clips in it, and I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't know what the story was, and I went out with my mate Lee in 1999. I was like, we have to see this movie. And then it was full of surprises, and it blew me away. You never really felt that again with that series, because I just didn't really feel like it had much more else to say beyond that.
Yeah,
and that's what worries me about.
They claimed that it was ever thus, right? That it had always been with sequels in mind. I don't agree, because you would not write, I mean, unless this was a note from the studio or something, but you wouldn't write your protagonist to essentially be able to cheat death and be omnipotent and literally fly away. At the end, if that was the plan, there's no struggle there. If you can literally shoot him and he won't die, so that is again a problem with the sequels. Is like all those fight scenes, wonderfully choreographed and shot though they are, they just feel flat because you're watching Neo kick ass. There's no, apart from that one moment where he stops a blade with the side of his hand and some blood comes out. And it shows us, but that's it. He cuts himself. That's his only vulnerability, And then the rest of the time, he's just whooping ass, flying around. It does. I mean, it's great in that you've then got fights with Morpheus. There's moments where Morpheus looks like he's in real shit, and that's nice. That does. But it still felt like they were all just badass, and you couldn't really hurt them. Certainly in the second film. And the third film has moments of sort of horror and jeopardy that feels real, because I guess more of it takes place in the quote-unquote real world, but it's not it's languid and long. It's ill. It's just lacking all the things that you love really about the Matrix. And that is one thing I'll say about every Matrix film. Actually, is that their second acts are very long and lag. I think with each one, I mean, it's true of the first one as well. The middle section is just sort of a bit drawn out,
It's that funhouse mirror effect, isn't it? It's like you've got really short legs and a tiny head and a really long trunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the first Matrix gets away with it more because there's more mystery and there's more jeopardy, and I think there is actually an interesting story unfolding. Whereas again, and you could make the same argument about Star Wars if you like, danger,
it's a trap.
Star Wars, but like. Yeah, it's a trap. You could take the original Star Wars works perfectly well as a capsule because it's about someone discovering this themselves. It lends itself a bit more to a sequel, I think. But yeah, again, I just don't really think the Matrix is. I just think it works very well as a capsule, as a kind of like, hyper high concept Outer Limits episode or something, or Twilight Zone, and that is not faint praise because those are both things I personally hold in very high esteem.
Indeed. Yeah.
It's hard to know where they're going to go. Again, I think the themes of it are as relevant as ever and good for them. I think it's very interesting that we've only got a singular Wachowski. No mention of Hugo Weaving or of Lawrence Fishburne or any of the others, and them returning makes about as much sense as Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss.
More so, if anything,
in terms of storytelling.
Morpheus.
Well, yeah, because Morpheus is still fucking alive. Yeah, exactly. So like, he's got an actual kind of license to come back. So yeah, hard to know what it's going to be about. I'm very glad they've only announced one, but the way this works now is they're wise to just not saying their intentions out loud. So it seems like the new frickin' Terminator is like, well, it's set up a trilogy for the new characters, and it's like, oh Jesus, is this gonna? Oh, do you know what it could be, man? It could be. Because there was, I know it was never official, but there's like, Michael B. Jordan for a new Matrix film. It could be that Neo and Carrie-Anne Moss and Trinity are programs in a training thing, and the new Neo person or whatever speaks to them like they're bloody Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit hack, but that is what we're talking about here, in my view. Talking about things that are a bit hack.
There's all sorts of weird. I mean, obviously the way it ends is that Neo basically merges with Smith, and that's why he kind of dies, which is weird because obviously I don't know why his body dies, but whatever. But it's like they cancel each other out. There's a yin yang thing there, and he's the other side. The Oracle calls him the other side of the equation, trying to balance itself out or whatever. So that's in essence what happens, and so it's kind of like he doesn't die. You don't physically see him die, but yeah.
But he's software ultimately, and the whole thing was about copying himself. And
yeah, so invariably, because doesn't the whole Matrix reset at the end of it as well? So it's kind of like, well, maybe he's in there somewhere. There's an argument to be made. It's fine. Look, it's one. We can't really speculate too much because there's literally no other information there. So it's good to see Carrie-Anne Moss coming back though. She's someone who I wish did more. I mean, she probably does do a lot.
Did you see her in the Marvel stuff she was in?
I only saw in the what was the mashup thing called?
The Defenders.
I saw that.
Oh yeah, no, that sucked. She was in a couple of others, and she was really great in those. She was really good. I mean, and she was good in the Defenders as well. But her kind of character arc and stuff, because she was in Jessica Jones primarily, and then she turned up in other things because the kind of lawyers in those shows all blended.
Yeah,
and stuff. She was really good, man. She was great. It was like she played this kind of like nasty ice queen type person. Because I think her kind of thing, she's maybe a bit, because Trinity wasn't evil, of course, but she gets kind of typecast a bit as like quite icy bitches, doesn't she? I mean, because Trinity has to warm up, but then like in Memento, obviously she's the kind of femme fatale type because they're doing film noir, and then like I say in Jessica Jones, she's kind of like this icy lawyer bitch. So I like her anyway. I think she's great.
She's great, and I mean
so seeing her back,
the thing I've seen her in that she was completely was Fido. That was where she was very.
Oh
different.
God, Yes, of course. Oh yeah, totally against type. That's a very good point. Yeah, she plays completely against type as kind of suburban 50s mom in zombie apocalypse picket fence. I love that. That film's great.
It's wonderful, and no one talks about it.
Film.
It's so good. It honestly,
it's very much one of these nice little concept movies that came and went, isn't it? So I remember when that was coming out, and I was like, oh, that sounds really great. Never saw it, and then it turned up on whichever streaming service, and I was like, oh, sweet, Fido, nice one. Ended up watching it, really and she's fantastic in it. Great movie. I suggest, don't want to derail this podcast, but I suggest you go out and watch Fido if you can.
It's relevant.
Shit, I've just looked it up. 2006, man.
Fido.
Jesus, yeah.
Wow.
We so old.
Well, The Matrix is 20 years old this year, so
certainly is.
That's a weird thing that that seems to be happening more and more. Is sort of making, I guess, because of the nature of. I don't know. It seems like people are hanging around. That's the wrong phrase, but people seem to have. Certainly people like Keanu Reeves seems ageless and timeless, and and Tom Cruise and people like that. And it's like we're getting sequels to stuff like, well, obviously Top Gun is happening again, and it's like we're getting these sequels to stuff like 20, 30 years on, and that's just sort of really unprecedented, isn't it? We're entering this age of sort of like rekindling things, and I guess The Matrix falls into that category now. I mean, it's 20 years old, for God's sake. I mean, it
is, yeah. I mean, and it's something that I know a lot of people. I think that a big section of our audience are our age, and that's the mid-30s. For anyone who's asking, who hadn't guessed from our fucking ancient references or whatever, but I know there are plenty among our audience who are in the kind of anywhere between 18 and 25, and that's it's really, you cannot understate the immense cultural capital of The Matrix. I mean, it was insanely influential in that, I think Shrek has a Matrix parody in it. Everything parodied it. People, like I think I said in our review, people would go walking around in black trench coats and wearing sunglasses and all that. And video games as well. It was immensely influential on that. It had this huge cultural capital, and that was because. Because I don't think anyone expected it to be a failure, but I don't think anybody expected it to do as well as it did. And then suddenly, I think they felt they had the next Star Wars on their hands, so they tried to engineer that. So the like ancillary media in terms of comic books, there's the animated stuff, which again I really like the animated stuff, video games, novels, like merchandise, and the huge push, and the sequels were a cultural event as well. That was another thing. They were a huge cultural event, and the level of excitement for them was absolutely fever pitch. I mean, I remember the night I went to Matrix Revolutions would have been like a midnight show at the View Cinema, or probably the Warner Village as it was then in the day, and there was a dude dressed as Agent Smith, you know what I mean? And there's not the kind of things where people dress up, not in 2003, now that's quite common, the whole cosplay thing, but it just wasn't really done then. So to see someone like it was the same Phantom Menace same year, Phantom Menace 99, people were dressing up as stuff, and like that was kind of unheard of, and it took the kind of immense sort of Star Wars of it all to make that happen, and the same carried over into The Matrix. So and a lot of its cultural capital is lost because some feel it was sort of squandered by the way the sequels were handled, and they were quite disappointing. And again, you're going out to this thing in 2003 at midnight, someone's dressed up, and then you actually have to watch the film, and everyone walks out like well, it's a second act, I guess. If the third one's good, then so that kind of lukewarm thing, and then the actual seeing it, for a lot of people, seeing the third one was a bit like I don't know. Yeah. So it's got a lot of kind of, it's building on a kind of deflated cultural phenomena, I think, but a cultural phenomena nonetheless. And we talk about The Matrix, people still know what you're talking about. It hasn't gone away.
I don't think it. Yeah, it's funny because I think possibly by dint of the fact that the second and third film, they did a Back to the Future with them and brought them out the same year and shot them all concurrently vis-a-vis Ergo. They. I think because of that, the derision hadn't set in by the time they'd come and gone. So I think that wasn't, like, I know the second film generally was fairly well received. So I think by the time the third one rocked around, like, everyone wanted to know what was going to happen, and the second one ends on a cliffhanger. And so there was a hunger for it. And I think by the time both had come and gone, I think people fairly quickly took to bashing, especially the third one. But I guess because they weren't spread out, there wasn't time for any kind of rot to set in. There was never, and I think that was quite a shrewd move on their part, because actually in hindsight, if you tried to wrap up the second one in a different way and then start over again with the third one, and it was going to be like 3 or 4 years later, I just think that would have been. I think that's where people would have got worn out with it. Whereas I think the way it was structured, it did, even though it's been met largely with derision now. It's not. I don't think that. I think putting them out like that was a good way in terms of box office anyway to get people involved. And you had the what was the game called? Enter the Matrix, right?
Enter the Matrix. So there was the Path of Neo and also the Matrix Online. So we had a few.
Enter the Matrix came in between the two films, though, didn't it? So acted as
it had specially shot scenes. So you played as Ghost and Niobe, and there was specially shot scenes. So it was a kind of interwoven storyline.
Yeah.
And it was essentially interwoven with the movie. So it was this kind of multimedia sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to say experience because that's what they'd want me to say. But kind of multimedia experience.
Much like Erica out now for the PS4. Sorry. Yeah.
Available on PS4, Android and iPhone.
For the players. Isn't that what they said?
That is, yes. Very good. Sorry. Just as a sidebar, I watched Speed Racer on a flight recently, having never seen it, and that's a Wachowski's film, obviously based on the anime. And I really, really liked it. I kind of looked at it from the outside and I thought, I'm going to hate this. I thought I liked Jupiter Ascending because it was brilliantly terrible, because it was funny. I haven't watched Sense8, their Netflix series, but I really liked Speed Racer. I thought it worked really well as a live action cartoon. It works very experimentally in the way it represents certain things. I mean, because they do a thing where the cars are against a candy coloured background, but there's like no depth of field, so everything's kind of flat, and it's apparently quite nauseated a number of people in the cinema, which was found quite funny in a literal sense. So I quite like, I turned out to quite like that. I am not having a reappraisal of the Wachowskis. I did actually really like bloody hell, the big time bendy
Cloud Atlas
they did with Tom Twyker. Cloud Atlas. I quite liked Cloud Atlas. It's quite widely derided. I quite like Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas was based on the novel by David Mitchell, and I understand that David Mitchell is contributing to the script for the new Matrix film.
David Mitchell is in Mitchell and Webb.
Not that David Mitchell. No, I wish. I wish. But I quite like Cloud Atlas. I feel like. I feel like the bits in Cloud Atlas I liked were probably the Tom Twyker parts, but who knows? But that was a very late in the game appraisal of the kind of Wachowski career trajectory. So there you go.
The thing I'll say this for them. They swing for the fences, and I tried to watch Sense8 with the wife, and I think we got through one episode, and we're just like, I can't be doing with this. It was just very pretentious, if I can say that. And I think when they miss spectacularly, unfortunately.
They have this real pretentious kind of bone to them, and that's what I think. I think they skirted that in The Matrix, and I think the Matrix sequels lean a bit too much into it. I mean, it's very much smart. It's not as smart as it thinks it is. And that often is a problem. That's why I like Speed, because Speed Racer didn't do that. That's just them using their visualism to make a live 2-hour cartoon that's really silly. I mean, one of the characters has a best friend is a chimpanzee, and there's a scene where they get stuck in a luxury kind of airship eating all the chocolate. That's the kind of level of stuff. Whereas Cloud Atlas was kind of, it's not as smart as it thinks it is, but it was kind of a nice mood piece. I let it sort of wash over me. And it's like a series of, Cloud Atlas is essentially a series of kind of slightly linked vignettes, which I thought worked rather well for me. A lot of people hated it, but there you go. A lot of people really hated Cloud Atlas, in fact. But there you are. I put it on in a kind of ironic way and kind of went, no, I'm the cunt. I'm actually quite enjoying this. But there you go. So there you go. I mean, I don't know. Who knows, man? And again, I don't know. I've never had any particular concept of the Wachowskis as separate artists. I don't know who brings what to that table. There are certain duos where you kind of know who's doing what, and that is not one of them. So if it is just Lana Wachowski, and it very much appears to be just Lana Wachowski, I don't know what Lana Wachowski's input is into those, or what her kind of approach is, or anything. So who's to say if that's going to make it better or worse?
I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of them was suffering with mental illness. Is that right? Or one of them, I seem to remember. I think one of them wasn't very well. I mean, that could be why. It's just
so that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't think it was any kind of drama, but I wasn't, because the bad thing to do here is kind of go like they hate each other, because there's no evidence.
No, I don't think so.
I've tried to suggest that by saying, hey, look, they've been working together recently. I don't think. Okay, I didn't realise one of them was ill.
I think so. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure I heard somewhere one of them had. One of them was struggling with something, I think. So. Okay. Well, I kind of feel like we have shot the proverbial shit. We've exhausted
that one. I am satisfied if you are.
I am indeed.
Excellent. That's a weirdly dry way to end. Like,
I demand satisfaction.
I demand satisfaction. Well, there you go. So Duncan and I have taken a couple of weeks off. I was away for a long time. We've both been busy and we wanted a little bit of a chill. So we should be back week after next. I think this will probably go out on YouTube on Sunday. Patrons, you'll be getting it today, which is Friday the 23rd. Yeah. Those of you getting it on YouTube on Sunday night, Duncan and I will be back in hopefully about 7 or 8 days with a new episode of It Ain't Broke, because we have been chilling and illing, trying to fit in some streams in between. I might do a gaming stream in the week if I can find the time, so look forward to that. Duncan, what have you?
What say you, sir? What have I? I did. Well, I did a stream for Patreon 2 nights ago, last night, whenever it was, which was great. But yes, we did. We may well do some live streaming stuff. I think you and I are possibly going to do live streaming on the things what we have been up to lately, because there's been some interesting things afoot in our personal careers that are probably worth talking about. I think maybe. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, why not?
I reckon so.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. We're wrapping up. You will find us on Twitter. You will find us on Facebook. You'll find us on YouTube, of course, where you're probably watching this. We have a Patreon if you want to throw in some shekels. There is a PayPal as well as an Amazon affiliate. So it doesn't matter what you buy, if it's dildos and lube, Marmite sponges, or just a single screw with a 3/4 inch thread. You can buy that from our Amazon affiliate store, and we'll get the kickbacks. Fill your boots. And we will see you all again soon for the next time we put something on the internet. Goodbye.
Bye.
Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Valverde shop.